Hello, my name's Callum, and welcome to The Price of Life.
Petrol, diesel in New Zealand. Let's get cracking. Ever wondered where New Zealand petrol and diesel comes from?
First off, New Zealand imports 30% of refined oil into the country. The other 70% of NZ's annual fuel demand comes from Marsden Point. Dun 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 dun! However, Marsden Point is going to shut most likely in the next year, which means 100% will be imported from overseas. But for the present date, I will show you the Marsden Point journey, as this is most likely where your fuel came from. Marsden Point is New Zealand's only oil refinery. It converts crude oil into petrol, diesel, jet fuel, boat fuel, etc., etc. So the first part of the journey is extracting the oil in its crude form and sending to Marsden Point. In 2010, 59.4% of New Zealand's crude oil was imported from the Middle East. 28% was imported from Asia, 8.9% from Russia, and 3.7% from Australia. For the purposes of this video, I will show the oil extraction coming from the Middle East and being sent to Marsden Point. The biggest oil field in the Middle East is the Ghawar oil field. The oil is extracted from the ground using pumps and water flooding. There is a video in the references below showing you this. The crude oil is then pumped through the Aramco master gas system pipeline. The oil then arrives at Port Jubail. The oil is then pumped into a tanker ship at Port Jubail. The ship then travels 17,882 kilometers to arrive at Marsden Point. The crude oil is then pumped into Marsden Point. The crude oil is then refined. There is a good YouTube video of oil refining in the link below. So for the purposes of this video, I chose Z Fuel because of their transparency online, and it was very easy to find information. Shout out Z Fuel. So the refined diesel and petrol is then loaded onto the Ghawar Z Fuel's coastal tanker. The tanker then travels from Marsden Point to Lyttleton Port. The petrol and diesel is then pumped into storage tanks at Lyttleton Port. From the storage tanks, they are then pumped along a pipeline from Lyttleton Port to Woolston ExxonMobil. From Woolston, tanker trucks then load the fuel into their tanks and drive to Bishopdale Z fuel station. At the fuel station, they are then pumped into underground storage containers that we use to fuel our cars. Well done! You made it this far. Keep with me. It's time we talk about the environmental costs. Environmental consumption costs. Category number 1. The Ghawar oil field. So first off, building the initial infrastructure of an oil field uses a vast amount of resources, time and energy. There is a research stage where large trucks with machinery use 3D seismic exploration to find the oil. Plans and consents are then drawn up. The infrastructure planning begins, drawing designs with computers, etc. The infrastructure is then built. The roads, the power lines, buildings, concrete pads, oil drills are all developed. This uses a vast amount of resources and energy. Finally, the oil pumps are created. Extracting oil from the Ghawar field uses the water flooding technique. So thousands of litres of water, most likely seawater, is used as well as power and energy. Maintaining all of this infrastructure costs resources and energy throughout the years. Regular maintenance is needed and lots of different resources are used. Also, the harsh environment of the desert adds to the consumption costs and therefore the environmental costs, with cooling systems, more maintenance, etc. It's really hard to put an exact environmental cost figure of all of the energy and resources used for this process. My purpose for this video is just to make you aware of the environmental costs. Oh yeah! The extraction is done. Time for category number 2. Environmental logistic costs. So first I'm going to talk about the master gas system pipeline. To send the oil to Jubail, it travels roughly 500 km along a pipeline. Maintaining 500 kilometers of steel pipe and the initial infrastructure costs of building the pipeline would be huge. At Jubail port, the oil is then pumped into an oil tanker ship. The port infrastructure and maintenance costs would also be added in the environmental cost. The ship I will use for this video is the Tom Valborg, which was recently at Marsden Point. The Tom Valborg is a 99,999 ton deadweight ship. To find how much oil it consumes, I converted it to TEU size, which is 3,846 TEU. 1 TEU stands for a 20-foot shipping container. The Tom Valborg travelled 17,882 kilometres at 12 knots, which takes 35.5 days at sea. This ship would use roughly 40 tonne of low sulphur fuel per day. For the entire journey, it used 1,340 tonnes of low sulphur fuel. The ship brought roughly 600,000 barrels of oil, which is 95,400 tonnes of oil. It then arrives at Marsden Point and pumps the oil into the refinery. The initial environmental cost of building the ship, as well as regular maintenance, would use a huge amount of resources. The average lifespan of an oil tanker ship is roughly 21 years. It is then sent to a ship graveyard and recycled for scrap metal. A ship graveyard video will be in the link below. Once the ship is scrapped, we would then have to rebuild a ship of this size using vast amount of resources. You're still with me, well done! 3/4 of the way there, let's crack on. Now let's talk about the Marsden Point environmental costs. So the initial building of the whole infrastructure at Marsden Point would have used huge amounts of resources. Maintaining a refinery of this size would also use huge amounts of resources. So I've attempted to get a very, very basic power cost of using an oil refinery. I used a 2020 American study of oil refineries. The whole of America had 131 oil refineries in 2020. The total oil refinery power cost for 2020 was 44,027 million kilowatt hours. By dividing this by 131 oil refineries, I came up with the result of 336,083,969 kilowatt hours for one refinery for 1 year. Divided by 365 days, this equals 920,777 kilowatt hours per day. That is so much power. Anywho, the next environmental cost to consider is shipping the oil to Lyttleton port. So the oil is pumped into the Ghawar Z oil tanker. It travels 1,461 kilometres at 12 knots, taking 2.7 days to reach Lyttleton port. It uses roughly 35 tonnes of oil per day, which is 94.5 tonnes of oil for the journey. It ships 43 million litres of oil to the Lyttleton port and is pumped into the Lyttleton storage tanks. Again, there is the boat costs, the Lyttleton port costs, the pipeline to Woolston mobile costs, and the infrastructure and maintenance costs of all of these. Almost there, yeah. For this video, I have estimated a 26-ton oil tanker picks up the fuel from Woolston Mobile. It carries 18,000 litres of fuel. It travels 14.3 kilometres to the Bishopdale Z fuel station and uses 6.8 litres of diesel for the truck journey. There is the initial cost of building the truck, the yearly cost of maintaining an oil tanker truck. The average lifespan of a truck is roughly 10 to 15 years, so you would factor this into consideration for finding the true consumption costs. The fuel is then pumped into the petrol station. The last cost to consider is the infrastructure of the petrol station and the regular maintenance. Another environmental cost to consider is the maintenance and infrastructure of roading. We made it! Congratulations! It's been a long video. I hope I taught you something very interesting about oil. And enjoy your day. Time for the credits. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked my content, give it a good thumbs up. And if you want to see more, click the subscribe button and join me on my adventures. You can also support me by going to buymeacoffee.com in the link below.